Вы знаете, мне кажется, лидеру ХДС было бы полезно уяснить следующее. Поскольку без непосредственной помощи военнослужащих Бундесвера боевая стрельба этими крылатыми ракетами невозможна, удар ими по любым российским объектам критически важной транспортной инфраструктуры, а в качестве цели, как вы, наверное, заметили, Мерц уверенно обозначал Крымский мост, вы об этом сказали. Так вот, все это будет расцениваться как прямое участие ФРГ в боевых действиях на стороне киевского режима со всеми вытекающими последствиями для Германии.
This is my video update on this Saturday afternoon, April the 19th, coming to you from Nicosia, Cyprus. Let's talk about some news. And let's start things off with Viktor Orban. And he was giving an interview yesterday, and he said some pretty amazing things. Some very interesting truth bombs dropped by Viktor Orban. He said that the West was in a proxy war with Russia, and the West, they lost. They gave everything to Ukraine, and they still lost this war to Russia. And he also said that the European Union, they cannot admit that they have lost the war to Russia, because losing a war is a very big deal, according to the Hungarian Prime Minister. And then he also said that US President Trump is way ahead of the Europeans. He is getting out of Project Ukraine, and he is saving the United States from this defeat. Wow. Very, very interesting things said by Viktor Orban in an interview with OT YouTube channel published on Thursday. Orban said the whole Western world has thrown its weight behind Ukraine in its conflict with Russia, which he described as a proxy war. According to the Hungarian Prime Minister, the West has lost, but European leaders are hesitant to admit failure. He argued that this outcome will have a big impact on the entire West, as losing a war is a serious thing. Orban went on to say that European leaders are offering Ukraine to continue the war and in return receive European Union membership. He argued that this would be problematic as Ukraine is no longer sovereign and cannot support itself. Regarding the US, the Hungarian Prime Minister said Washington is in a better position thanks to President Donald Trump's approach, having broken with the Ukraine policies pursued by his predecessor, Joe Biden. According to Orban, Trump, and I quote, saved the US from a serious defeat. Trump saved the US from a serious defeat. Okay, very important statements from Orban. He also posted on X, Orban, he posted this: rushing Ukraine into the EU, that's Brussels' plan, not ours. They want to admit a country with no clear borders, no functioning economy, no sovereignty, and they expect EU taxpayers to fund a million-strong army for decades. This is not peace. It's a blank check for endless war. So we're getting reports that Denmark is about to send its military into Ukraine, or has actually sent its military into Ukraine. It's hard to get a feel for what exactly has gone down in in Denmark? What is going on in Denmark? Have they sent their military to Ukraine? Are they about to send their military to Ukraine? Not quite sure, but we are getting a lot of reports which are confirming that Danish soldiers will be sent to Ukraine in order to train in Ukraine. Russia is calling these soldiers legitimate targets. The Danish armed forces plan to send Danish soldiers to courses in Ukraine, but Russia warns against drawing Denmark deeper into the conflict. Something tells me that Denmark has already dispatched its soldiers to Ukraine under the pretext that they're going there to train. They're going there to train. That is what Denmark is saying. Now, remember that the three countries, the three confirmed countries in the coalition of the willing are the UK, France, and Denmark. You also have the Baltic countries, but the three original countries that when Stammer announced his coalition of the willing, the three countries that said we're in was, of course, the UK, of course, France, and Denmark said we are in. We are part of the coalition of the willing. And then you had the three Baltic countries, of course. The three Baltic countries, they said they'll be part of the coalition of the willing, and they're going to send their military to Ukraine. So three Baltic countries means you'll have about 5 military officials go to Ukraine from the Baltic countries. But Denmark is looking like it's the first country, or will become the first country to send its military into Ukraine. And what is Russia's reaction? They are legitimate targets. So the big news from yesterday was the Bloomberg report that they have spoken to sources who have told them the framework, the contours of the proposal that Rubio presented to allies in France. The proposal for peace in Ukraine, if you want to call it that. Let's say a ceasefire in Ukraine, I think is probably a more accurate description as to what the US presented to the allies in France, to Germany, to France, and to the UK. Ukraine was also at that meeting. I talked about this in my video update yesterday, and according to Bloomberg, and you have to always be very, very careful with Bloomberg reporting. I've been burned many times reporting on stories coming out of Bloomberg, which were later proven to be completely false and fake news. But we are getting other outlets which are reporting similar things, like the Wall Street Journal and the New York Post. But Bloomberg broke the news first. According to their sources, they've seen some of the proposal that Rubio presented. And I have to say that reading the Bloomberg article, my conclusion is that it doesn't really tell us much. It really does not get into many details. Bloomberg claims that their sources, this is what they had. They didn't really have much detail as to what was presented, but they have the framework, the architecture as to what was presented. And it does appear like we're looking at some sort of a proposal that's for Project Ukraine, that's a mix, a hybrid between Istanbul Plus June 2024 and the Kellogg ceasefire plan. That's my conclusion from what I read from Bloomberg. And I have to always say this, it's coming from Bloomberg, so So we have to take these reports with a huge grain of salt. Anyway, let me talk about the proposal according to Bloomberg that was presented to the allies. It talks about a freeze on the front lines. It talks about Ukraine and the Europeans pushing for security guarantees. It talks about sanctions relief. And it also talks about the 4 territories going to Moscow. The 4 territories controlled by Moscow. And then Bloomberg posted a follow-up story which says that the U.S., in this proposal, the U.S. is also ready to recognize Crimea as a part of the Russian Federation, officially recognize Crimea as part of the Russian Federation. The article also says that the Europeans will not be forced to recognize the 4 territories as part of Russia. And of course, Ukraine's aspirations. That's the words that Bloomberg uses. Ukraine's aspirations to enter NATO will be put on hold or will be stopped. It doesn't get into many details. And I think the most important detail that it doesn't reveal is with the territories, which is why I say it's a mix between Istanbul Plus and Kellogg's plan, because Kellogg's plan was about a freeze. We're going to get to a ceasefire, or we're going to push for a ceasefire, and that means a freeze on the front lines. That's what Kellogg's plan was pushing for. And it was also pushing for some sort of security guarantees. Now, the Istanbul Plus plan, it's rooted in Ukraine. Of course, Ukraine not entering NATO, but one of the most important parts of Istanbul Plus was the 4 territories in their entirety as being part of the Russian Federation. And that would mean that any Ukraine military or Ukraine presence in the 4 territories, Lugansk, Donetsk, Zaporozhye, and Kherson, they would have to leave. The Bloomberg article does not get into any specifics as to what they mean by the 4 territories being controlled by Moscow. So you don't really know if the proposal presented to the Europeans and to Ukraine by Rubio said that we're going to have a freeze on the front lines, which I think Russia's not going to accept right away. But anyway, we'll see. They're saying we're going to have a freeze. We're going to call a ceasefire, freeze everything. And then we recognize that Moscow controls the 4 territories. What it doesn't say is, does Moscow control, in this proposal, the 4 territories in their entirety? Will Ukraine have to leave those 4 territories? Or does Russia control those 4 territories as to where they are right now if you freeze the fighting? In other words, the Ukraine military will have a presence in Zaporozhye, Kherson, and Donetsk, because Lugansk has pretty much fallen under the full control of Russia. So you're looking at the 3 oblasts where you do have a Ukraine military presence. Will they be allowed to stay, or will they be told to leave? And then the full oblast is recognized as part of the Russian Federation. It doesn't say. The proposal does not say, and I think that's kind of the most important part, or one of the most important parts. I also don't like how the Bloomberg article says that Ukraine's NATO aspirations. It uses the words aspiration. It's aspiration to enter NATO. Will put on hold or will be stopped. I don't know. I just didn't like the wording. It makes it feel as if sometime in the future those aspirations could be changed, right? To re-enter to enter NATO. So I don't know. What else did this article say? Did this report say? Sanctions relief. Russia never really pressed for sanctions relief. That wasn't a condition that Russia ever talked about in their terms. So the sanctions relief, I don't think, really carries much significance as far as being some sort of a carrot for Russia. But that's the proposal that allegedly Rubio put on the table, and this is allegedly the proposal that he also told Lavrov about when he called Lavrov after he had the meeting in Paris. Now, the most important part of the Bloomberg article is that they admit that this settlement will not be a lasting peace. It will not be a definitive settlement, I think is the words that they used according to their source. Let me read you what Bloomberg says. One of the officials said the plans, which need to be further discussed with Kiev, wouldn't amount to a definitive settlement, and that European allies wouldn't recognize the occupied territories as Russian. The officials stressed that talks would be moot if the Kremlin didn't agree to stop the fighting, and that providing Ukraine with security guarantees to ensure that any deal holds up was essential. That's the other thing, the security guarantees. It's very unclear if when Bloomberg is mentioning security guarantees, if they were actually part of the proposal, or if this was something that the Europeans brought up as Rubio, Witkoff, Kellogg, as they presented this proposal. If the Europeans said, can you put in this proposal security guarantees? That would mean if there are security guarantees put into the proposal, then that would open the door for the coalition of the willing to enter Ukraine, for Stammer and for Macron to actually say that now they have the green light to send troops into Ukraine, to send troops to secure the Black Sea and to try and get to Odessa. So the article doesn't clear that up either. But it says this is not, according to the source, this is not a definitive settlement, which goes against everything that Russia has been saying when it comes to a peace in Ukraine. Russia has said that they want to address the root causes, and they want a definitive settlement to the problem in Ukraine. Not only in Ukraine, to the entire European security architecture. They want to solve this whole thing. They want a long-term solution, a lasting long-term solution. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that in this proposal, the U.S. also put out a framework, presented a framework to the Europeans as to how they would monitor this freeze or this ceasefire, though it didn't get into any specifics. We have no specifics, really. There's no specifics in any of this reporting. So do I believe this reporting? Do you believe this reporting? I imagine there's some truth to what Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal is putting out there. I imagine there is some truth to it. But you always have to remember that you're talking about sources that are European sources. So you're probably talking about European diplomats who have seen this proposal or were at the meeting, which did not go well for the Europeans. So you got to imagine that the Europeans are trying to paint the best picture they can with regards to the negotiations. And you probably have some Ukrainian sources in there as well that Bloomberg is drawing from. And they're going to try to present a positive spin on all of this. So there's probably some truth, but there's a lot that we just don't know. And I imagine, if I were to take a guess, I imagine that the truth of what was presented to the Europeans was much more in favor of Istanbul plus June 2024, and much more in favor of Witkoff's diplomacy rather than the Kellogg ceasefire plan. That would be my guess. But we'll find out, because Rubio and Trump, they said that in the next couple of days or couple of weeks, they're going to want answers from Ukraine and Russia as to whether they're in agreement with this proposal. And I would call this a ceasefire proposal, because it's not a solution to the fighting. Its main goal is to get a ceasefire and to freeze the conflict. That does look like that is the goal, as Trump says, to stop the killing, not to solve the problem in Ukraine, but to stop it, to freeze it. It does have a Minsk III type of vibe, I have to say, but I just don't trust Bloomberg, man. I don't trust Bloomberg's reporting. I don't trust the Wall Street Journal. I don't trust the New York Post, and they're all weighing in on this proposal. But who knows? We'll find out in the next couple of days. I think Russia's going to have a hard time agreeing to something like this. If the 4 territories in their entirety are to be given to Russia in this proposal, then I think Ukraine is going to have an impossible time agreeing to this. So that's the situation there. And we also had yesterday an announcement that a minerals deal memorandum has been signed. A letter of intent, a memorandum. It was actually published, this memorandum. It's a 1-page document. It says nothing. It just says nothing. It says that pretty much the United States and Ukraine agreed to sign a minerals deal. Doesn't get into any specifics about the deal at all. And they're going to sign this deal next week in the United States. It's not going to be Zelensky. It's going to be my precious Schmiegel. He is going to travel to the United States, and he's going to sign this minerals deal next Thursday with Scott Bessent. That's the letter of intent. That's the memorandum that was signed. It gets into no detail, no specifics. Which probably means that we're looking at pretty much the same memorandum, the same minerals deal that was presented a couple of months ago to Zelensky, and that led to the huge row in the White House. The minerals deal that Ukraine has been trying to avoid signing, because it would mean that Zelensky is signing away all the resources of Ukraine to the United States in perpetuity. Now, the amount that Ukraine has to hand over to the United States in back pay has been dropped from $300 billion to $100 billion. So what? The main point of the memorandum is, once again, the United States controlling Ukraine's resources forever. That's the main point of the memorandum. But if Zelensky is desperate, which I imagine he has to be, then he might sign this thing. I mean, the guy is desperate, very desperate, and he doesn't really have any other options left other than to sign the memorandum and hope that this will somehow commit the United States to Ukraine. It's not going to provide Ukraine security guarantees, at least the memorandum that we know of does not say that they're going to give Ukraine security guarantees to the United States. But if you're Zelensky and you have no more options left, you understand that the Europeans, they're not going to be able to help you, and that Trump is going to be walking away from Project Ukraine, this is your last chance. You don't have many other options left other than to sign this deal. And if you're Ukraine, you're probably saying, you know what, if you're Zelensky, you're probably saying, you know what, let me sign this thing. Maybe I can pull the United States into the conflict somehow. Maybe I can buy some time. Worst case scenario, a couple of months or a couple of years down the line, you know, we're Ukraine, we're the most corrupt country in Europe, in the world. We don't have to honor this this deal anyway that we may sign next week in DC. So I would not be surprised if Schmeigel does end up going to DC. He will go to DC and he does sign this thing. And then, of course, you can always talk about the legitimacy of an Zelensky government signing any deal. Is the Zelensky government even legitimate? You can make that argument as well. So this is the last card that Zelensky can play. The last hope. I wouldn't even say it's a card that he's playing. This is his last chance, his last hope for him to somehow figure out a way to either get the U.S. involved or to buy him enough time so he can figure out an exit or something like that. So Trump made some interesting statements yesterday as he was speaking to the media. Trump, he expressed his frustration with Project Ukraine, and he said that he's ready to walk away. He is absolutely ready to walk away from Project Ukraine. Both Rubio and Trump, we are getting reports that they are saying in meetings that they have many other foreign policy issues to deal with, and they cannot remain committed to Project Ukraine indefinitely. They need to either get some sort of a deal or to drop it and move on. And Trump said as much yesterday as he was talking to the media. He said, and I quote, "If for some reason one of the two parties makes it very difficult, we're just going to say you're foolish, you're fools, you're horrible people," Trump said, adding, "We're going to just take a pass, but hopefully we won't have to do that." And he's talking about the proposal that has been given to the Europeans, to Ukraine, and has been sent to Russia. If they can't get an agreement on this proposal, whatever this proposal is, then Trump is saying we're out. We're out of this thing and we're moving on. Axios put an article out with the title, "Trump ranted to aides about washing his hands of Russia, Ukraine." And in the article, Axios says 2 European diplomats confirmed Rubio said Trump was losing his patience and might withdraw from the process if a deal wasn't reached soon. If the deal wasn't reached soon. That's what Axios is saying. It goes back to what Orban said in his interview. Orban said that Trump saved the U.S. from a serious defeat. That's one way of putting it, Orban. And Orban, he's an ally of Trump. He's a friend of Trump. And he's saying it in a very, very U.S. Trump friendly way, that Trump is saving the United States from a defeat. But the U.S., even though they were very much running this conflict, running this war, as we now know from the New York Times reporting, they have the ability to, the luxury, I don't know how you would phrase it, to walk away. They can do this. As much as they were running this conflict from Germany, providing the weapons, providing the money, providing the surveillance, the targeting, everything, the intel, the CIA, all the all the facilities and the secret facilities and secret bases and everything that was in Ukraine over, not over 3 years, but over 10 years, maybe even going back further. The US has the ability to walk away from this thing. The Europeans, not so much. And if the US beats the Europeans to walking away from this thing, which they have, they've beat the Europeans to the punch, and they're walking out of Project Ukraine. That's what Orban is saying. The United States, they beat us to this. The Europeans could have said, we're out of this. But nope, the Europeans doubled down and tripled down. Now they want more escalation. Now they're talking about troops in Ukraine. Now we've got Denmark who's talking about sending military to Ukraine, or maybe they already have military in Ukraine. Anyway, the Europeans are getting more dug in when it comes to the conflict in Ukraine and the conflict with Russia. The US is pulling out, man. And Europe's going to be stuck with this thing. So Axios also said that Ukraine swiftly agreed to Trump's plan for a 30-day ceasefire, but Russia has slow-walked that proposal and argued they are winning on the battlefield and thus have a number of conditions for any peace agreement. You know, Bloomberg, they said the same thing. Axios is talking about this. Bloomberg said the same thing. The Wall Street Journal said the same thing. The New York Post said the same thing when they're talking about Rubio and Trump and Project Ukraine. They're running with the narrative that Ukraine agreed to a ceasefire and it's Russia that did not agree to a ceasefire, which is wrong, which is fake news. The reality of the situation is that Ukraine and the Europeans, they were pushing for an unconditional ceasefire. That's what they wanted, which doesn't make any sense. An unconditional ceasefire, that's what they were pushing for. And they wanted Russia to agree to an unconditional ceasefire. Why would any military that's winning in all of history, why would anyone agree to an unconditional ceasefire? Has it ever happened in all of history that the winning military agrees to an unconditional ceasefire? No. I don't even think there's such a thing. Is there even such a thing as an unconditional ceasefire? Doesn't make any sense, but that's what they were pushing for. The reality is that Russia absolutely agreed to a 30-day energy ceasefire, which they honored, and Ukraine did not. And that Russia also agreed to a Black Sea ceasefire, which they would have liked to have honored, but it was the Europeans that blocked the lifting of sanctions on the Russian Agricultural Bank, so that ceasefire couldn't even begin because the Europeans completely blocked it. That's the reality of this whole ceasefire thing. It's not the collectivist media is dumbing it down in favor of Ukraine, and they're making it seem as if Russia would not agree to a ceasefire, so they're the ones to blame. You see where they're taking this? Where the truth of the matter is that what the Europeans and Ukraine were asking for was ridiculous, and what the Russians agreed to was exactly what Trump proposed to them, and that's what they honored, which was the energy ceasefire and the Black Sea ceasefire, but it was the Europeans and Ukraine that did not honor those ceasefires. That's the truth of it. Anyway, I thought I would mention that. How about we hear from Medvedev on all of this stuff? Here is what Dmitry Medvedev posted. American officials have said that if there is no progress on the Ukrainian case, the United States will wash its hands of it wisely, and the EU should do the same. Then Russia will figure it out faster. The New York Post is saying that Ukraine, according to their sources, after seeing this proposal, they're 90% ready to agree to the Rubio-Trump proposal. They're 90% ready. Now it's up to Russia, according to Ukrainian officials. They're going to try to blame this on Russia. You know what Trump is going to do? Trump is going to walk away from this thing. He's going to wash his hands of this thing, and he's covering all his bases, right? He's going to try to get a minerals deal so he can come back and say, I got a minerals deal. You see, I'm getting us our money back, even though there's probably no money to get, but he can come out and say that. He's going to say, look, I presented a proposal for a ceasefire. Russia did not accept it. Ukraine did not accept it, or Ukraine accepted it and Russia did not accept it, or Russia accepted it, Ukraine did not accept it, Ukraine accepted it, Russia did not accept it. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. He's covering all his bases, man. He's covering all his bases, and he's going to say, we're out of this. And if they both accept it, then okay. He gets a temporary freeze, which is what, from reading the reports on this proposal, that's what we're talking about. Some sort of a freeze, which the Europeans don't recognize, which Ukraine is not going to recognize, and Trump can serve the remainder of his 3-4 years without having Ukraine as a headache, and then the next administration, I guess, could deal with it somewhere down the line. So that's the New York Post. And what else? What else? How are we doing on time? Yeah, let's wrap this thing up. There's so much news today, but we got to wrap this thing up. We are getting reports, starting with the New York Times and from all kinds of media outlets, including in the Middle East, which are confirming that the United States is leaving Syria. The U.S. military is starting to withdraw from Syria. 3 bases. We've seen a withdrawal of U.S. forces from 3 bases. The reports are that 600 soldiers are now leaving Syria from a total of 2,000 or 3,000, maybe 4,000. No one really knows the exact number, to be quite honest. But 600 soldiers are the reports that are now on their way out of Syria. I talked about this in a video a couple of days ago, how the U.S. is going to leave Syria in the next 2 months. It looks like it's happening, which is very important news. What else? I can't really talk about this story because the last time I mentioned the COOF, my channel got banned for a week. So I'm not even gonna talk about it because I'll be taken down for a week. But on the government, on the White House website, the U.S. White House government website, they are now saying that the COOF originated in China, in you know which lab, and yeah, it's now coming from the White House. And I think there's a geopolitical motive to all of this, obviously, because now you have the tensions with China, so this further demonizes China, even if it's true or not true, whatever. I'm not going to weigh in on this because I don't want to be banned for another week on YouTube. So this is a news topic that I guess I'm prohibited from really talking about. But I think everyone understands what I mean when I say that the COOF on the White House website is now saying that it originated in China. All right, what else? What else? And we'll get to our clown world big story in Moldova. It's Easter weekend. Tomorrow is Easter Sunday. And in the Orthodox faith, the churches, the bishops, church representatives, they go to Jerusalem and they take part in a ritual where they're given the holy fire, the holy flame, and they take that flame back to their country. And then when we have our service, which is at midnight, when we have the midnight mass, at least here in Cyprus and in Greece, we have the midnight mass. Everyone actually can light a candle with that holy flame, with that holy fire from Jerusalem. And so in Moldova, the bishop in Moldova, Bishop Marcel, he was going to get on a plane to travel to Jerusalem, and the Moldovan authorities, they blocked him. They prevented him from traveling to Jerusalem. They took his passport. They would not give it back until his plane left. He was not on the plane. Then they gave the passport back. And then he tried again later on. to get on another flight, and they blocked him again from traveling to Jerusalem. Moldova, what are you doing, man? Maya Sandu trying to stir up as much tension and trouble as she can with, with Russia, but you know, I consider it as if she's trying to stir up trouble with the Orthodox Church, the Orthodox believers. Bad stuff, very bad stuff. Don't like it. Don't like it at all. The UN is investigating this, by the way. The UN said they're going to investigate what Sandu and Moldova is trying to do here, what they did. So that's coming out of Moldova. And let's do some clown world and we can wrap this video up. So much news today. So where should we begin? Spiritual terror. That's what they're labeling what happened to the bishop from Moldova. Spiritual terror by not allowing him to fly to Jerusalem. Moldova really is ready to enter the European Union, huh? Maya Sandu is aligning Moldovan values with EU values, right? she's aligning them really well by blocking the religious freedom of this bishop. Anyway, let's talk about Katy Perry. Katy Perry, the astronaut, who said that her 10-minute space ride is uniting the whole country. Okay. All right, enough said there. I don't need to get into any details. Her 10-minute ride into space, astronaut Katy Perry. She's a singer, and she's also an astronaut, everybody. It's uniting the whole United States. Yeah, it is uniting the United States. I think the whole United States is united in the absurdity of it all. They're united as they're laughing at the whole thing. Jeff Bezos pays off to have a buddy like Jeff Bezos, huh? To have a friend that's worth $250 billion. You get to go to space. You get to take a ride to space and then call yourself an astronaut. Anyway, Zelensky, he imposed sanctions against 20 Russian people, I believe 20, maybe 30. One of the entities or the people that he put sanctions on was a director of a cat theater, Kuklachev. I have no idea who this is, but from what I understand, this is a person who has a cat show or a cat theater. They've been sanctioned. I believe a belly dancer was also sanctioned by the Green Goblin. Okay. And Zelensky is also now saying that China, he has proof that China is providing weapons to Russia and that they're actually, I believe he said they're actually making the weapons in Russia as well. Or they're manufacturing the weapons in China and they're delivering them to Russia, or the Chinese are manufacturing the weapons in Russia and they're using them in the conflict. I forgot what he said. It's all kinds of nonsense coming from Zelensky. China, of course, is denying this. They're saying that Zelensky is talking nonsense. But Zelensky actually came out in a statement and said that he's got the receipts. The SBU, he says, they have the information that the intelligence that China is making weapons for Russia in this conflict. Making friends, Zelensky. Making friends. Oh man, you know the guy that the two Chinese guys that they captured, well, the alleged Chinese soldiers that they captured. The one guy is Zhang RENBO. Not Rambo, RENBO. Not Rambo, RENBO. Not John Rambo, it's Zhang RENBO. Oh man. RENBO. RENBO, Rambo, whatever. All right, that's the video, everybody. The Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and X. Go to the Duran shop, pick up some merch, like what I'm wearing in this video. Update, the link is in the description box down below. Colonel Troutman, they drew first blood. They drew first blood. Dun, 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 dun. RAMBO. RENBO. RENBO. All right, take care.